Our third presentation will be from Justin Byrne. It will be on animal byproducts. So if we could just see Justin, there we are. And if we could just get Justin to share his screen. There we go. Okay, well, without any further interruption, I'll leave you to it, Justin.
Thanks, Tom, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to the presentation. I'm just going to briefly cover importing animal feed from outside the EU post-Brexit from the animal byproducts perspective. So I'm just going to start the presentation now. Just to start briefly on the definition, because this is actually has come up quite a little bit since Brexit. So the definition of an animal byproduct means entire bodies or parts of animals, products of animal origin, or other products obtained from animals. And this is the key point, which are not intended for human consumption. So there's a key difference there between products of animal origin, which are for human consumption and which are not. So if they're not destined for human consumption, they're an animal byproduct. And that definition, like once it becomes an animal byproduct, is irreversible. So it can't be reversed. And that's a real key point. Moving on to the regulations, the two EU regs are 1069/2009 and 142/2011, which is implementing 1069. So 142 is really the key. It's about 350 odd pages long, so there's immense detail in it. But for importing, there's two key annexes, which we'll go through now in a second. And another important point is the ABP regs do not have an inclusion level, which is out of scope. So out of scope means being covered by the regs or not being covered by the regs. So if your product or animal feed in this case contains any amount of animal byproduct, then that's covered by the animal byproducts regs, i.e. it's not out of scope. And the requirements of the ABP regs have to be met. So that's a key point. There's a difference between importing into the EU and then what applies when the animal byproduct is placed on the market in the EU. So a key example of this is pet food. So if you take pet food today in its final packaging on the EU market, that's not in scope of the animal byproducts reg. So therefore, it can be placed on the market with no further restrictions. And that means practically, say, we don't register or approve pet food stores or retailers selling pet food, etc., etc. But when that pet food, if it is coming in from a third country, arrives at the border control post, it is in scope and it must meet the import requirements. And they'll be detailed as we go through. But that's a key point, like that what it implies for coming into the country can be different in certain circumstances than placed on the market within the country or within the EU itself. The two annexes around importation that are key are Annex 14 and Annex 15 of 142. And these are really the Bible as such when it comes to importing in any animal byproduct. Annex 14, Chapter 1, Section 1 covers the animal byproducts destined for the feed chain. So it's limited down to that particular chapter. And that Section 1 states all the requirements in a general terms, and then there's further sections within that chapter that gives the detail of each individual product. And then Annex 15 contains the model health certs, and that contains health certs for both within the feed chain and outside the feed chain purposes. So Annex 14, Chapter 1, Section 1, and these are the general terms, general requirements. So the first one is that must have been produced from Category 3 materials. Now the definition of Category 3 materials are materials that were fit for human consumption, but for some reason the operator has decided that they're not going to be sent for human consumption. So they still meet very high standards in terms of safety. They must comply with import and transit conditions, which are laid down in Table 1. So Table 1 is a key point as well within this chapter, and we'll go through it now through an example. I'll take you through it. They must come from a listed third country. So this means that the EU has certain lists of third countries which it allows different products come into the EU from. So the third country in question must be listed, and at this stage the UK is more or less listed for everything. It must come from an approved or registered establishment or plant in the third country, and it must be accompanied to the point of entry to the EU by a health cert, And table 1 then gives you the details of how you go about picking or choosing which health cert will apply. And it must be presented at the point of entry where veterinary checks take place. So they're all requirements laid down in the animal byproducts regs to start with. So this is table 1. This is what it looks like. As you can see, it's quite detailed. There's plenty of detail. There's 9 rows or product types that are listed in it, and I'm going to take you through one just row as an example of how to go about defining the different elements of it and working out which health cert will apply. So the product I've chosen just as an example are milk-based products and milk-derived products, colostrum or colostrum products. So that's the product type, and you really need as much detail as you possibly can get about the product to help you work through the table and work through the different requirements. So that's a basic, you need, what treatment type it has had in terms of heat treatments, if they're applicable or not, what species it was derived from, etc., etc. Then the second column in the table details the raw materials. So for this example, there's 2 different sets. So A is milk-based products, which are category 3 materials referred to in Article 10E and F and H of 1069. And then the second set is colostrum or colostrum products, which are category 3 materials from live animals that did not show any signs of disease transmissible through the colostrum to humans or animals. So that's the only raw materials that can be used for this particular product. And that's the table there. It's in row number 4. You can see the product and the raw material section is highlighted. So it gives you the detail there. Then the next column is import and transit conditions. So for this example, it lays down that the milk or milk-based products, colostrum products, shall comply with the requirements set out in section 4 of this chapter, which is chapter 1. And section 4 is about a page long, and it details out certain requirements which have to be met for the import and transit conditions. Most of those are laid down in the health cert that will apply anyway, but it's good to see them so you can see exactly what your product will have to meet to come in the first place. The next column is the third countries list. So in this case, A is in the case of milk and milk-based products, which are authorized third countries listed in Annex 1 to 605/2010. The UK has now been listed in that, so that's very welcome. And B is in the case of colostrum and colostrum products. So these are third countries listed and authorized in column A of Annex 1 to Reg 605/2010. So you can see there's a little slight difference there, but the UK is listed in both. And again, in the table here, both of those are highlighted, the import and transit conditions and the third countries lists that apply. So the last column then is the certificate or model document. So A is in the case of milk-based products and milk-derived products. The cert that applies then would be Annex 15, Chapter 2A cert. And B is in the case of colostrum products, which would be Annex 15, Chapter 2B. So you can see that the table gives you how to work out what cert would apply. So if you follow the table across, you can work out very quickly which cert applies. It's important to know that in Annex 15, there's about 35 different either certs or declarations models within that. So to go through each one individually is a body of work. So this table reduces all that down, and the key starting point is to work out your product at the very beginning. So if you know what your product is and the details of how it was treated, then it's very easy to find the correct row, and then you just work across the columns, and it gives you the annex at the end of it, the Annex 15 chapter, whatever health cert that will apply. So in this case, it's either a Chapter 2A or 2B health cert. And there it is there on the table. That's the very last column over on the right-hand side highlighted. So the key messages from that is 142 Annex 14 Table 1 contains everything that you need to determine which cert applies. And really the key point there is the full details of the health cert. You need to have them at the very beginning, the transformation step, the heat treatments, what has it been derived from, which country obviously has it come from in the first place. So the more information you can have about the product, and specifically in animal byproducts term, the actual animal byproduct that's within the feed, So the more detail you can get, the easier and the quicker it is to get through the table and work out what are the requirements. Other key points is that the cert itself must accompany the consignment at all times, and the cert must be provided in the third country by a veterinary, so the official veterinarian in that case. So that's from the animal byproducts perspective. I hope it makes reasonable sense, and I'll be available afterwards to answer any questions for that. So back to you, Tom.